Hi, welcome to Relish Books. Today I am very excited to start a little three-part series talking about three different authors, um, George Macdonald, C.S. Lewis, and J.R.R. Tolkien, but not talking, I'm going to talk about all of their work a little bit, but mostly using these authors, looking at their writing styles, and in their writing styles addressing this controversy that existed back at the time and still exists today. And it is this argument of that I think largely it's an argument mostly in more religious circles or religiously influenced writing circles, but I think it's applicable to anybody. If you're interested in writing, if you're interested in these great authors and how they approach that. And that is this question of what is the purpose in writing fiction and how do you approach it? How did these authors approach it based on like their religious views? Um, do you approach fiction purely as storytelling? You have a story to tell, and you tell it about these characters, about these people that you have made up or whatever. Or is it a tool? Is it a means for metaphors for real life, and using stories and fiction to prove a point or make give a moral? And I think these three authors are perfect to use because they had kind of this disagreement in their time and also because they're a perfect progression of example. You have George Macdonald, who is so heavily metaphorical in his books that you can't sometimes even tell what his metaphors are for. And a lot of the time he's giving a moral, but it's kind of hard to tell what it is. Then you have C.S. Lewis in the middle, who tells very clear stories with very clear metaphors that you can understand, very clear metaphors, very clear morals. And then you have Tolkien, who tells a great story and claims that there are no metaphors in it. And I want to say, first of all, that I do really like all three of these authors. Um, and I'm going to not really address the controversy a lot until the final video, but I'm not going to make a secret about that. I am definitely the most in the Tolkien camp when it comes to this question. And but I'm going to start with George Macdonald. I'm going to talk about all three in all the videos, but kind of give each video to each of them. So George Macdonald, while C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were contemporaries, and George Macdonald was as well, but he was older. He was born in 1824 and died in 1905, while like C.S. Lewis was born in 1898 and died in 1963. So they overlapped, but he was an older man. And just the different relationships between them. I don't know as Macdonald and C.S. Lewis had much of a personal friendship. But C.S. Lewis was by far the most influenced by George Macdonald than anybody else. He is the single greatest influence in C.S. Lewis's writing. I would say that, Tolkien was the greatest influence in C.S. Lewis's life, his personal life, and who he became. But George Macdonald really influenced C.S. Lewis's writings. And so he was, older guy before his time, and C.S. Lewis like really looked up to him, kind of idolized him. And he was while C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were professors, teachers, George Macdonald was a minister of the Trinity Congregational Church. I think something that's also really interesting about these authors is they're all religious, but they each had a different religion. C.S. Lewis was in the Anglican Church, and Tolkien was Catholic. So of course they were going to have some disagreements, but they also have some common ground. And George Macdonald is kind of considered the father of modern fantasy writing, and I think he does deserve that. And while I talked about how confusing some of his metaphor is, he has some really great writing too. And sometimes I actually really enjoy this kind of style where his writing is beautiful. And if your writing is beautiful, I think you can get away with being confusing sometimes. It's not my favorite, it's not maybe the ideal in my mind, but I do think it's really interesting. I've read a few of his books. I have here, these are more like his children's books. He did some children's books, some fairy tales, and then some more, I don't know, serious work, you might say. But even his children's books are very heavily kind of mystic and metaphorical. But Princess and the Goblin and The Princess and Curdie, I really enjoyed these when I was young. I remember reading them, being really excited about them. It was like they were unlike other children's books I had read for sure. They have, while not really being dark in subject matter, they have this sense of mystery, and they have just this prevailing darkness to them. And really, looking back on them, The Princess and the Goblin, I still really like. It's interesting, it's mysterious, it's exciting. Princess and Curdie, honestly, the feeling that I get from it mostly is just sadness and depression. And that's really just in the way that he writes it, in the tone that he sets for it, in the time period, but just the way that he paints the surroundings. It just has this dark feeling to it, and this deep depression. The ending is super sad, and it's probably a metaphor for something or other, but I'm really not sure. Just, I don't know, that building these great kingdoms is futile or something like that. I'm not really sure. I do enjoy them though. I tried to read his book Lilith. That one was so metaphorically dense and weird that I could not get through it. But I love At the Back of the North Wind. That is, I think, a beautiful book, even if I don't understand it. I really enjoyed it. It has this sense of fairy tale adventure and like this sense of high fantasy and beauty, even if you don't quite get it. Definitely not going to be for everyone, and I don't blame anybody who doesn't like it, but I personally do really enjoy it. And so George Macdonald kind of, again, he's at the far side of this spectrum of these three authors, and he really, I mean, I can see how C.S. Lewis really embraced his style, um, partly because even though they are different in religions, and I have no idea what all the differences are, um, C.S. Lewis deeply, deeply respected his religious views and his sermons and what he preached. And I think it makes sense when you have respect for someone in that area that their work would highly inspire and influence you as well. C.S. Lewis actually put George MacDonald as a character into one of his books, The Great Divorce, which is fun. Again, he really idolized this guy. And I think he wrote a biography on him or some sort of book on him, just like his biggest fan and his biggest influence. And I think it would be really interesting to see what C.S. Lewis's writing would have been like without this influence. I mean, he even said that it was like he owed the greatest debt to him that a man could, essentially. And so, I don't know, that's super, super interesting. And then, so while George MacDonald was like this hero for C.S. Lewis, Tolkien was his personal friend. And so that relationship was pretty different. And like, while he respected Tolkien's work and gave him encouragement in a time when, I know it's weird to like think about it now, but in a time when Tolkien was ridiculed for his writings and nobody took them seriously or thought they could be anything more than a hobby, C.S. Lewis believed in him and encouraged him. But they also had a lot of differences, which I'll get into a little more in my other videos. But yeah, so George MacDonald, highly complicated author, but there's a lot of greatness there too. I do really respect him. I think, and again, I'm kind of getting into this controversy a little bit. I think when you start pushing your views so hard into your fiction, it is going to it's going to mess with it. And I think that's really what happened in Lilith. He was pushing not only his views, but some of his very, very odd, weird views into his fiction to where it wasn't like a novel anymore. You were basically just wandering through this wilderness of metaphor. And I think that's the extreme, extreme example. Because again, I really enjoy like At the Back of the North Wind and The Princess and the Goblin. So those are a few thoughts on George Macdonald, and next time I will be talking about C.S. Lewis and then Tolkien and some of their relationship and their differences and what I think about that. So I will see you next time. Bye.